jury duty. It's vital in our judicial system, but our next guest believes that was just as important. It's picking the right jurors. Robert Swafford is an expert jury consultant who joins us this morning to talk all about that. And Robert, first and foremost, thank you for being with us here on Start Your Day. Look, the 12 jurors, they did their job. 10 hours it took. Unanimous on all 3 counts. We don't know their names yet, but we do know they deliberated for those hours. Well, what does that tell you about them as a group?
Well, for a case like this, that's actually not that many hours. I mean, what it tells us is that they thoroughly went through the information, but they didn't delay coming back with a verdict. And so I don't think that there was too much dispute back in the room. If you think about the amount of testimony and the evidence and the issues of law that you had to discuss, if you were just to thoroughly go through the evidence and say that we're going to be considerate and come up with a verdict, that's a very reasonable amount of time. I mean, I've had cases where juries have been out for 3 or 4 days. And so I think they were very thoughtful and they did their job. And at some point, I think someone needs to, and that may be me, point out what an excellent job the prosecution did in jury selection and the ultimate trial of the case. And I think that that's one of the things we need to look for in terms of, okay, what can we do going forward? Because that's the real issue. We've had this one just verdict and a background of many, many unjust verdicts. And so what did they do that we can model and make a difference in the future on?
Yeah. And so, Robert, you're the expert here, jury consultant. You're looking at body language and background and how they answered the questions. But these are still human beings. They're people. And there's so much that's not known, including how they'll collaborate and deliberate. I can't even get along sometimes with the people in my house, and there's only 2 of us. So what makes a good juror?
Well, the question is what makes a good juror for who? So someone who is a good juror for one side is a bad juror for the other side. So that's why the prosecution, like the people who are populating the prosecution, was so important. These weren't, we always talk about implicit bias, right? And typically we think about implicit bias, we're thinking about, okay, well, what's the implicit bias of the jurors? Do they have an unacknowledged racial bias? That's the place that it primarily plays into whenever we think about things like this. And implicit bias means that you're not aware of it. It's unconscious. And there's lots and lots of research about this. Now the thing about it is that prosecutors have implicit bias. So if you are a prosecutor and day in and day out, you are picking juries, thinking, okay, well, I need a jury that will believe police officers because all my witnesses are police officers. If that's what you do day in and day out, and then all of a sudden you're prosecuting a police officer and you're turning around and trying to pick a jury, then that makes it very difficult for you. You have to turn your brain completely around. And that's why it was so critical in this case that you had the team that you had, because the team that was doing jury selection in this case wasn't your county attorney or your district attorney. It wasn't people who were prosecuting cases day in and day out. Most of those prosecutors were working for free. They were working pro bono. They volunteered their time. And these were the best of the best. One person said that it was a team of Michael Jordans in terms of legal teams, and you have Keith Ellison, who's former congressman and attorney general, Steve Schlechter, who did the jury selection, who's a former federal prosecutor, but now is in civil practice. You had Jerry Blackwell, who represents companies like Walmart. You had Neil Katyal, who's a former Solicitor General. And so these are just the best lawyers that you could imagine. And they were doing the right thing. They were looking at it and saying, okay, let's make sure that we hold on to people who maybe believe that Black Lives Matter, that those people aren't eliminated, that they end up on the jury.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And I watched all of jury selection. I'll tell you that they were doing an excellent job to make sure that people, because here's the thing: if you eliminated all the people who had posted on social media, Black Lives Matter, or expressed an opinion about this, or were horrified by the video, if you eliminated all of those potential jurors, then who would you be left with? What kind of person wouldn't be horrified by that? And is that the person that you need on the jury? And so my concern is that if we don't learn from this and say, okay, well, this is what worked, right? What worked is to have lawyers come in who aren't working with police officers day in and day out. Lawyers who have a different perspective and may have it's not that we all have implicit biases, but maybe have a different set of implicit biases, right? And would be able to come in and say, okay, what would be a good juror for this case? And I think that there are a lot of lawyers across the country who would be willing to volunteer their time on a case like this. And I think they need to step up.
Usually
you're
the local DA
person I heard say that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Usually the local DA actually has to work with the police in other cases, and they're on their side. So I think a dream team, and if OJ had the original dream team, this was probably dream team too. And as Ellison said, they were willing to share the ball and pass it around. You talked about the implicit bias, though. In a case of this exposure, of this magnitude, and they say they're all impartial, but going in as a jury consultant, do you know they're not going to be as impartial as they say they are? You're just looking for somebody with maybe an open mind, and maybe you think that you can change their mind?
Well, to be clear, I'm hired by one side on a case. And the reason I'm hired on one side of a case is they believe that my participation will help them win. And so, so whenever I'm working on a case, I'm trying to win the case. I'm not trying to find somebody who's unbiased or has an open mind. I'm trying to get rid of people who have a bias against me. And because everyone, to some degree, has a level of bias, that the feeling is, and sort of the logic of it is that if I get rid of the people who are biased against me, then that's going to leave people who are biased for me. And so, so in my profession, we're very clear that of a couple of things. The first thing is there is no such thing as someone who has no bias. There is no such thing as someone who's purely objective. Everybody has life experiences that affect how they view the case. And there's no way you can wipe out those life experiences. And for the most part, people don't have insight into their biases. And so the thing is especially in a case like this, that involves such incredible emotional issues and political issues and people's background, that what you're doing is you're trying to get rid of the people, because it's not you don't get to pick a jury, you eliminate people. And so you're trying to eliminate the people who have the biases against you, and I think that, and you're trying to hold on to the people, who could come to the decision that you're looking for.
Wow, you make it painfully obvious too that these jury pools, those who you draw from or eliminate from, are as diverse and inclusive as we can get. Boy, it's just fascinating the work you do, jury consultant Robert Swafford. Thank you so much for starting your day with us. I hope you'll be back so we can learn even more about, what happens. Hopefully not on another case like this, but one thing's for sure, your expertise are not going out of style anytime soon. We're right back.
Not at all.
Thank you so much for having me.